Welcome to the Leadercast podcast, a weekly deep dive into the stories that transformed our guests into leaders worth following. I'm your host, Joe Boyd. If you've been enjoying the podcast, thank you so much for being a listener. One simple thing you can do to help us out is give a review wherever you listen. Today's guest is Kim Anthony. I'm excited for you to hear her story of how she became a national champion in gymnastics. But underneath all that, you will see that what was happening the whole time is she was being formed in the sort of person that she is today. She's a contributor here on Leadercast, Now, and was a speaker at our Amplify event. And I think the one thing you're going to take away from this is the one thing that she had to do to find peace in her life. You might need to do it too. Kim Anthony, welcome to the Leadercast podcast.
Hey, Joe. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. It's so great when I get to talk to a real world friend. We've known each other for almost 10 years now, I think. I had to go back and check.
Unbelievable.
It's crazy.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And as soon as, just behind the scenes, 10 years ago, my creative agency was trying to produce some movies, and we actually optioned your life rights to your movie.
Yes.
And wrote some scripts on it, and it has yet to materialize, but you never know.
Never know.
The process of getting to do that with our screenwriter, Brad, really made your story so even more close to my heart. And so I'm just excited to be able for you to be able to share that today. So,
I appreciate that.
And thanks for being on our platform, Leadercast Now, and speaking at our Amplify event. You've already
so much fun.
Yeah. Get emails all the time of folks saying that they love you and love your content on our platform. So thanks so much for doing that.
Thanks for sharing that. That means a lot.
Yeah. All right. So let's dive in because I would love, could you just tell me a little bit of kind of how you grew up and what your early ambitions were as a kid? What you hope to become, and we'll kind of launch from the very beginning, if that works.
Okay. No, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, I grew up in a pretty rough situation. My mother was mostly a single mom, and even when she was married, she was a single mom because my dad wasn't around. He was only around when it was convenient for him. So we struggled financially. And there were drugs, not that my mother was involved in that, but my father was. So I was trying to earn my value in my father's eyes by rolling joints for him and handling drugs so that he could be proud of me. And the things that happened in my life demonstrated that could be one of the things that would make him happy. And I remember sitting in front of this I was at this little party that he was having, and on the coffee table in front of me were all of these drugs of choice.
Wow.
And I sat there. I was the only child in the room, smoke-filled, rolling joints, making my daddy proud.
Wow.
And I equated handling drugs with finally having a sense of worth in his eyes. And I went to a crack dealer's house when I was 13, thinking that this dealer could teach me how to make crack so that I could go back and show my dad my skills so he could be proud of me yet again. So I guess the future looked bleak.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was a different kind of kid.
So
had some different.
That in of itself, that was not happening to me when I was a kid.
No.
And not that your story is, I'm sure there are other folks that have similar stories, but that, your childhood starting off differently than a lot of folks listening to this podcast was probably.
Yes.
I think we all have a moment. Did you have a moment where as a kid you were like, maybe this is not normal? Maybe I shouldn't be in a room like this. Did you have those moments?
I did not. It was so common for me that I didn't realize until I was in college that other people didn't live like that. They didn't grow up like that. Yeah. Believe it or not. Yeah, it was just so commonplace, Joe.
Well, I know where your story is going to go. You're going to become a national champion gymnast. So how did that start? How did you get an interest in gymnastics? Particularly, I would say, is it fair to say like the folks you grew up around probably weren't that into gymnastics generally?
Generally, no. I think just about every kid flips around
Yeah.
outside, right? In the
Sure.
grass, in the side. We didn't have grass. We had a brick sidewalk.
Yeah.
So that's where I started. Watched Nadia Comaneci in the, I think, 76 Olympics.
Hmm.
And she kind of put some order into all of the flips and things that I was doing. I was on fences, jumping off stairs and swinging on the monkey bars and doing all kinds of wacky stuff.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is, how you play follow the leader?
Sure.
When I was the leader, kids were getting hurt. They were trying to do the things I was doing, and I always won that
Yeah.
game, believe it or not. But I started flipping outside on the sidewalk of my grandmother's house, and I had to be smart so I wouldn't hurt myself because it was, not a soft surface.
Yeah.
And I started teaching myself side aerials and all kinds of things. And my mom was afraid that I was going to get injured
Sure.
by, you know, busting my head wide
Yeah.
open, as they would say.
Yeah.
And she took me to a gym, a little recreation class. We took 2 buses across town to get there. And that was my first experience being in a gym with all of these mats. And it was like heaven,
Yeah.
Joe. It was like the angels started singing, the sky opened up.
How old were you then?
I was 8. I
Okay.
was 8. Let's see. No, I was 9. I was 9, almost 10.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so a whole new world opens up, right?
Whole new world.
Yeah.
And I got in trouble during that class because I was on the high bar when I should have been on the low bar. I was on the high beam when I should have been on the low beam. And the coach called me over afterwards, and I thought I was going to get in trouble and that he would tell me to
Yeah.
never, ever come back again. So I, sheepishly went over to him, and he asked me how I learned how to do the things that I knew how to do. He said, "Where did you take gymnastics before?" And I said, "I just flip on my grandmother's sidewalk.
Yeah.
That's what I do."
Yeah.
And he had me show me the skills that I had taught myself, and he invited me to join the team right then and there. And that's where it started.
Well, you can see what we were thinking. I mean, your story is like a great underdog sports story at one level,
Mm.
right? And I know it gets much deeper, but and gymnastics, from my perspective, I had a niece who was very into competitive gymnastics until she was like
Mhm.
13 or 14. And I knew just watching her life, it can be like all encompassing. To me, it feels even more so than other sports in some ways. Was it sort
Yes.
of instantly like that? Did it sort of become your whole life?
It did. It started off 3 days a week, then 5 days, then six, and then you're competing on the weekends. So I wasn't able to participate in any other sports because there just wasn't time.
Yeah.
I'd go to school, come home, do my homework, go to practice at 4 o'clock, and end at 10. And then because we couldn't afford to pay for my lessons, we would then clean the 20,000 plus square foot gym after practice.
So
So
that's how you and your mom paid for their
that
lessons.
is one of the ways.
Yeah.
And we'd raise money. Well, gosh, my godfather was a drug dealer, and he owned a corner store in the neighborhood, and they set up what do there's this little jar that Jerry's kids,
Hmm.
and you put money in the jar,
Yeah.
your change at the cash register. So they set up one of those little jars for me. And the thing was that people would put money in it to support me, but people kept stealing the jar. And then they wanted me to work behind the counter
Uh-huh.
on the weekends or whenever I had time so that people could see where their money was going. And they
Yeah.
thought it would be a great community thing. But my mother refused to allow me to work there because she knew that drugs were sold there as well. And she didn't want me to be involved in any of that.
So, one of the things we'd like to talk about is those early mentors and leaders that helped shape you.
Mhm.
As a kid, who comes to mind as sort of you couldn't have got where you got without them?
Oh, that would definitely be my mother.
Yeah,
I don't know if we can count parents,
they
but
count. Absolutely, they count.
they count.
Yeah.
Okay, so definitely she was an incredible mentor
Yeah.
for me. And she had experienced a lot of disappointment in terms of her dreams not being fulfilled. Because, for instance, she got a full scholarship to go to college, an academic scholarship, but she didn't go and couldn't go because her parents couldn't afford to pay the $25 application fee.
Wow.
So that was a huge disappointment for her. And she raised me with this thought in mind: you can do whatever you want. And I always came up with some wild, wacky things that I wanted to do. And she never denied me the access to that, like gymnastics. She's like, okay, this girl is wild. She needs to get into a safe place.
Yeah.
So she sacrificed so that I could do gymnastics. And she really instilled in me the fact that if there's something that I want to go after, do it. Don't
Yeah.
worry about failing. You may find that you like it. You may find that you don't like it, but you should at least try.
Yeah. How about those early coaches? I also have like a layman's view that some gymnastics coaches are like very strict. So
Yes.
did you have some that, if you think about leadership in general, did you have some coaches that felt like good role models of leaders and maybe some that didn't? Did you go through that whole spectrum?
Yes,
Yeah.
I did. Early on, there were the majority of the coaches. No, I won't say the majority. The main coaches I worked with, some of them were very difficult and hard on me, and I guess hard on everyone, but it
Yeah.
seemed especially hard on me. So I had not been told that I was any good until I got to college.
Oh, wow.
But there were a couple of coaches. Monica Manns was one of them. Early on, she saw something in me and she really pushed me to excel. And she believed in me and she wanted me to understand that I had a gift, but it was hard for me to realize that
Yeah.
because, I mean, and in gymnastics, especially back in the 70s when I started, there was a racial barrier. I was the only little Black girl there, and she happened to be a Black coach.
Okay.
And she saw that I had something special and I didn't realize it. And literally in my mind, Joe, I was thinking, and I had been told that I had been wasting my time because gymnastics is not for little girls who look like me. So I was told that, and I believed it. And as I practiced, as I took my turn, I was just having fun. I wasn't necessarily thinking that I could ever compete at this high level, but she knew that I could. And so she introduced me to friends who paid for dance training. Jamie Patterson, he paid for me to take ballet and jazz so that it could improve my gymnastics. And it got to a point where I got so good at dance where I had to choose which one. Did I want to go perform on Broadway one day, or did I want to do
Yeah.
gymnastics? So I chose gymnastics, and so yeah, I think Monica was a really impactful person early on.
Was there a specific moment when you remember realizing that you could be great? Like, was it like a switch that flips, or was it kind of a gradual thing?
Okay, so and I might be jumping too far
No,
ahead.
that's fine.
That didn't happen until my freshman year in college.
And you were already on a
And
scholarship to UCLA, right?
yes, I
So
had competed in Olympic trials. I
you
had
should have known.
competed. I should have known. I had won gold medals for our country.
Right.
And even in South Africa during apartheid, I won a gold. I won the meet,
Yeah.
which was
Wow.
quite interesting, a quite interesting experience. But I had done all of these things, competed on the U.S. national team, and I didn't know that I was any good because I had always been told by a certain coach that I wasn't good and that I would never amount to much. I would never be able to compete at a certain level. So I believed her because that's the person, I was around every day. I was training with her. And so I get to UCLA. I'm, getting rubbed out before practice because I back. Of course, there's lots of pain with gymnastics. There's neck. You fall on your neck. I don't know how many times. Um, in my career, I've landed on my neck, back, head. It's just, So I'm in pain. So he's working out my back, and then he tells me, this is Jerry Tomlinson. He says, "Kimmy, you can be a champion. You could win a national championship title." And I just looked at him. I'm like, "No, I can't." And he's like, "No, really, you can." And I had not even thought about winning anything in college. I almost didn't go to college because I was so tired, so burned out. As you can imagine, training that many hours for several years, it can wear on you,
Yeah.
right? And there's so much pressure, so much pressure. I would literally cry uncontrollably in class.
Wow.
At school because of the pressure that was on me. I didn't realize it at the time, but now I can look back and
Yeah.
say, okay, yeah, I was under a lot of pressure, not to mention all the strain that was going on at home. So Jerry told me that I could be a champion, and he kept telling me, he had to keep telling me, it wasn't this one time thing. And as he told me, and then Valerie Kondos told me, I began to start training like I was a champion. I didn't just train just to get by, and you want to stay on the beam and you want to do well. I didn't train just to do well. I trained to win.
I mean, there's a clear theme there that you have a leader in your life telling you you can't be a champion, and so you believed you couldn't be, and then you had some telling you could be. The irony is you technically were a champion, right? When they told you that you couldn't be. So how are you, like when you won the South Africa meet, that's a championship, right?
Yeah.
But did you think it was a fluke? Did you think you didn't deserve it?
I just thought, well, there's some reason why it happened. Maybe it's because I would come up with excuses because, well, I'm not that good. So maybe it's because, so and so wasn't competing at that meet. Or I don't even know all the lies I told myself.
But it's just, but you're hearing lies from someone else that get repeated in your own head.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
To flash all the way forward, do you think about that actively now as you mentor and lead others? Are you kind of aware of the power of your words?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I am. And I'm also aware of the power of the words that other people have heard in their past. And that's one of the things that, I mean, just because of all the work I've had to do to come through that, to overcome a lot of the obstacles I've faced, I see how important it is to I don't know if it's, you don't look back and stay on it, but to glance back at your past and try to assess some of the lies you may be believing because of something someone said to you or an experience you had, and the importance of digging into that and overcoming and really replacing those lies with what is true so that you can move forward, so that something way back in your past is not holding you back from your purpose and from your future.
Yeah. Well, interesting. Like the athletes are always so fascinating to me in terms of, as I think it forces you, there's like certain weird sports like golf that you can play till you're dead, but
I know, right?
for the especially gymnastics, it's like
Ooh.
you're done by the time you're 25 or something, right? Usually, I think,
Usually.
So you kind of have
Some
to
have gone past that, but
yeah, you kind of have to, like, in a weird way, force a whole career into a childhood almost, And so I'm sure that does some negative things to folks emotionally, but it also sort of maybe prepares you for what's next in ways. I guess what I'm getting to is I'm thinking, like, you did all this work to convince yourself that you could be a champion, and we should finish the story. You did become a champion.
Yeah.
But then I assume after that you have to then realize, but I have a long life to live, not as a gymnast.
Yeah.
So-
and I'm not going to be flipping around, for the rest of my life.
And even if you had chosen the Broadway route, you might have that would have been an extended career potentially.
Hmm.
So if we could just pick up the story, tell us about winning the championships and then sort of processing maybe what's next after all that.
Hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things with pro athletes, athletes in general. It's very difficult. You can't continue your career unless you're a golfer for the rest of your life,
Dang golfers
usually.
and bowlers.
Yeah. Oh, bowlers. I forgot about that. I need to take up one of those, or
Yeah. Right.
archery. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, um, so it's when you have experienced such an intense amount of success and this adrenaline and all that comes with being an athlete competing at a high level, it's very difficult to transition out of that career into something else and still get that same
Yeah.
rush, that
Yeah.
same amount of success, even depending on what you choose to do, and even having the recognition,
Mm.
because as an athlete, people are watching you. You have fans out there, but if you choose a certain career, you're not going to have people cheering you on
Right.
and rah rah. You might be behind a desk doing something wonderful, but you don't have that type of attention. And all of that takes getting used to. And so what I did, which I don't highly recommend anyone does, is I was so my identity was so wrapped up in my gymnastics, I didn't know who Kim was
Mm-hmm.
underneath that.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I just looked at other people's lives and I saw what they were doing, and if I thought it was fun, then I tried it.
Yeah.
So I did so many different things. It's not even funny. And I realized, so I would try something, and then I had a mom who was saying, "Yeah, girl, you can do
That's what I was saying. That
that."
sounds like
So,
what your mom would say. Just go for it. Yeah.
yes, yes, you can do that. So I tried a lot of different things for the wrong reasons, whether it's because I thought it would be fun, or because somebody else was doing it, or even because I thought it would bring attention. And worse than that, Joe, I didn't even plan to get into this, but um, there was a time in my life where I was working as hard as I could and living my life to pay back all the people who would ever hurt me, especially my dad.
What do you mean by when you say that? To,
I wanted to be as successful as possible, to have a job that brought attention to myself, so that when those people who hurt me saw me on television
yeah.
or saw me doing these great things, that they would regret that they
I
ever
got
hurt
you.
me.
That's a very honest
Hmm.
thing to say, but
Yeah.
it makes sense. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And I didn't realize I was doing it at the time. But as I began to grow and learn more about myself and what I was wired to do, and find some things that I was truly interested in, then I started to realize that, you know what, I was doing a lot of things for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And you can never experience this level of satisfaction if you're performing to get back at somebody,
Yeah.
you know? Um, yeah, so
Well,
I'll
that,
pause there because I went way off
no, I mean,
topic,
I
probably.
typically enjoy it when we go down those side trails, but, cause it really is I mean, it just makes, so when I met you 8 or 10 years ago, I met a very lovely, mature person that, I would not have I guess what I'm trying to say is you did a lot of growing up and evolving, obviously,
Hmm.
from that point to where you are now. And that
Yes.
what caused that? Some people never do that. Some people kind of stay
Hmm.
kind of bitter and angry, and it's
Right.
can ends up being very sad when they get older and they're still trying to prove to other
Yeah.
people. What
Hmm.
happened in your life that, unless you got us all totally fooled, it seems like something happened. What happened that
Yeah.
helped you sort of turn that corner away from that?
Well, I realized that I needed to forgive.
Hmm.
And I was writing my story and in book form, and it came time for me to publish it. And I thought I was done. And I like to spend time with God and pray and
Yeah.
get wisdom there. And I sensed that I needed to talk with my father and reconcile with him. And perhaps that reconciliation would do something for someone who read the book, who would encourage them and have a greater impact on them. So I didn't know how to do that because for years I had been trying to reach out to him and he wasn't returning my calls and didn't know what to do. And so I just prayed. I'm like, okay, God, if this is you, please, you have to do this because I don't know what else to do to reach him because he's literally acting like I don't exist. And a series of things happened out of my control. I didn't do a thing. I just sat and just prayed and waited. And by that November, it was before Thanksgiving, I was sitting across from him for the first time in years. And I was able to tell him because between the time that I felt I needed to reconcile with him and that time that I got to meet him, I think it was maybe 10 months or so, 9 or 10 months, I came to a place where I realized I needed to forgive him. And that forgiving him didn't mean that I continued to allow him or anyone else to hurt me. Forgiving him didn't mean I was letting him off the hook, but forgiving him was really releasing me from this bondage, this control that I had given him because of the pain that he had caused me. So it was really relinquishing my right to pay him back and just, say, you know what, I'm going to take back my life, take control of my life, and move forward and not allow this madness from the past to continue to hold me back. So I was able to sit across from him and say, hey, you know what? I I don't like what happened. I don't know why it happened, but I forgive you. I forgive you. And I would love for you to be a part of my life and the lives of my children, your grandchildren. And Joe, the healing, oh my good. And I can't, people ask me, so how were you able to forgive? I had thought I'd forgiven years before that,
Yeah.
but I was working to pay people back, right?
Yeah.
So I really didn't forgive. I was just trying to, channel it in a different direction. But every time I felt that pain again, I just chose to forgive. I chose to let go. I chose to ask for help, support from people around me who knew the things that had happened, support from God, the God that I believe in. And lo and behold, as time passed, I began to truly feel the ability to forgive him. And I think a lot of that happened because I was able to heal. I was able to acknowledge the pain and do the things that I needed to do to bring healing to my soul, to my emotions. And then I was able to truly forgive.
Thank you so much for talking about that. And I think this is a leadership podcast, but leadership is so tied in, obviously, to who we are as people. And I think forgiveness is a huge deal for everyone. And I like that you said what it's not, and maybe just want to reinforce that a little bit, because I feel like some folks might hear that and feel like I need to put myself back in a bad situation. Can you maybe just process how, if you feel like you want to forgive someone, what do you think is the most healthy way to process through doing that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, I think the reason why a lot of people choose not to forgive is because they think that holding on to that anger and that pain is hurting the other person. That, the saying, drinking, let's see, not forgiving someone is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Oh, yeah.
That's what's happening. We are the ones who are hurting. We are the ones who are affected anytime that person steps into a room or shows up. In leadership, there's so many things that happen or can happen in leadership that where people hurt us, people do things, they sabotage our success, there's so many, they fire us, whatever it is that we're experiencing as leaders. We need to forgive those people too. And again, forgiving people is not allowing them to continue to hurt you, because we need to have healthy boundaries. There'll be some people who need to earn your respect again, earn your trust again. And then there's other people you will never want to allow
Right.
inside of your boundary, because it's not a healthy situation. And that's okay. We can still choose to forgive and release our desire, release our right to pay people back. And what happens is those people, those individuals, whether we witness it ourselves or not, they will reap the consequences, I believe, of their choices, and I think it's important for us to make sure that we're not allowing them to continue to control our lives by holding on to that anger and unforgiveness.
That's powerful stuff that anybody anywhere, I think, can relate to. And thank you so much for sharing that. I knew our time would go quickly because your story is interesting and you're a very well-spoken, wise person. Thank you so much for being a part of our community. I just wanted to kind of ask a final question, really general, just in a round of, I know you do a lot of work now with folks and keynote speaking and coaching. And is there anything in the last, say, 3 to 5 years that's kind of been burning in your heart that you haven't talked about yet when you think about leadership? Is there a message that has been bubbling up that you would love to get out to our community?
Great question. When I think about leadership, again, and I could be repeating myself, I just think about the importance of being healthy emotionally. In order to be a good leader, we need to be able to lead ourselves first, right? I think as leaders, we're so strong, and that's why we rise to the top. So we have a tendency to, instead of allowing ourselves to feel pain, feel grief, or anything that we think does not add to our ability to lead well, we try to squash it. And the thing is when we squash it, when we ignore it, when we refuse to acknowledge some of the things that are really causing us mental anguish in our private time, then it is going to come out in the job. It's going to come out in insecurity. It's going to come out in possibly anger, in how we treat people, the difference between treating people with value and respect versus treating people as objects or just a means to an end. I think it's very important. So what I'm passionate about is helping leaders to understand themselves in a way that frees them up to be the greatest leader possible.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And I will co-sign that all day long, that your team will only be as healthy as you are if you're leading someone.
Yes.
And
yes.
There's a lot of work we can all do on ourselves, and that's really where leadership starts. And even because we've hit on some pretty deep things today, like for me, even things like therapy were super important. So some folks listening to this might just, you might think you logged on to learn how to be a better leader, and what you're really hearing is I might need to do a little work on myself. And if folks are hearing that, I think both of us would just want to encourage people to push into that, right?
Yes. And there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah.
In fact, you will come out on the other side of that so much stronger. Your team will recognize a difference.
Yeah.
They won't know what happened, but they'll
Right.
recognize the difference. Your amount of fulfillment and pleasure in your work is going to increase. I think there's so many benefits that can come from just kind of being introspective.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
assessing yourself. Yeah.
Kim, this was awesome. I'm sure people listening to this would love to connect with you somehow, or maybe get your book. So what's the best way for folks to find you on the internet?
Well, my website is inbrilliancemode.com.
Okay.
inbrilliancemode.com.
Nice. We'll go there and people can connect with you. Thank you so much. This won't be the last time we talk to you. You're an important part of Leadercast. Thanks for being a part of it.
Thanks, Joe. This was fun.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Talk to you later.